How can a country plan to export 60,000 tons of fruit, but end up with 40,000 tons rotting in warehouses? That's exactly what's happening right now. Just a short time ago, the Philippines made a bold promise to ship tens of thousands of tons of durian to China, the world's biggest buyer. On paper, it made perfect sense. Demand was huge. The opportunity was massive. But when the numbers finally came in, something didn't add up. Instead of 60,000 tons, only about 1,300 tons actually made it into China. That's not just a small miss, that's a collapse. And while exports stalled, the harvest didn't stop. Across parts of the Philippines, warehouses began filling up. Truckloads of durian sat unsold. Some of it started to spoil. Some never even made it off the trees. For many farmers, this wasn't just a bad season. It was a financial disaster. Imagine spending years growing a crop, expecting a huge buyer, only to watch it rot before it ever reaches the market. So what went wrong? Did China suddenly stop buying durian from the Philippines? Or is there a deeper problem that no one expected? To understand this, we need to look at one important thing first: why every country is fighting to sell durian to China in the first place. To understand this crisis, you first need to understand one thing. China isn't just a big market, it's the market. With a population of around 1.4 billion people, China has one of the largest consumer bases in the world. And when it comes to durian, demand is not just high, it's exploding. Every year, China imports around 1.5 million tons of durian, making it the largest durian importer on Earth. To put that into perspective, that's more than many countries produce in total. And here's the key point: China doesn't grow enough durian itself. Domestic production is tiny compared to demand. So if you want to sell durian at scale, China is the place to be. But it's not just about population size, it's about how people consume it. In China, durian isn't just eaten fresh. It's turned into cakes, ice cream, milk tea, pizza, even hot pot ingredients. It has become a mainstream food trend, especially among younger consumers. That turns durian into a multi-billion-dollar industry, not just a fruit. And where there's money, there's competition. Right now, Thailand dominates the market, supplying the vast majority of China's imported durian, in some periods over 90% of total imports. But Thailand isn't alone. Countries like Malaysia and Vietnam are rapidly expanding their exports, improving quality, and building strong supply chains to win a bigger share of this massive market. So imagine China as a giant supermarket. Every country wants shelf space, but only a few actually get it. And that's exactly where the Philippines saw an opportunity. A chance to enter the biggest market in the world and transform its agricultural future. Seeing how much money was flowing into the durian trade, the Philippines made a bold decision. They wanted in. The plan was simple on the surface: grow more durian, export it to China, and tap into a billion-dollar market. But in reality, this was a huge national gamble. The government began pushing a major expansion of the durian industry. Planting areas were increased. New regions were encouraged to grow durian. Programs were launched to support farmers with seedlings, training, and infrastructure. In 2024, the government even announced a plan to invest over $40 million into the industry, improving farming techniques, expanding plantations, and building better logistics systems. And the targets were ambitious: 60,000 tons of exports to China by 2025. 200,000 tons within a few years. If successful, this wouldn't just boost exports. It could transform the country's agricultural economy. For many farmers, this felt like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Imagine being a farmer growing low-income crops and suddenly hearing that a single fruit, durian, could be sold to China for much higher prices. So many farmers made a big decision. They switched crops. They invested time, money, and effort into planting durian trees, expecting future demand to be strong and stable. It was a long-term bet. Because durian trees don't produce fruit overnight, it takes years. But the belief was clear. If we can reach the Chinese market, everything changes. For a while, the plan looked promising. The market was there. The demand was real. The expansion was happening. But then reality hit, and it hit hard. But when the harvest finally arrived, something went terribly wrong. All the planning, all the investment, all the expectations, they didn't match reality. Instead of exporting 60,000 tons, the Philippines managed to send only about 1,300 tons of durian to China in the first half of the year. That's not just a shortfall, that's less than 1% of the target. In fact, it accounted for less than 0.1% of China's total durian imports. Compared to countries like Thailand and Vietnam, it was almost invisible. And while exports failed, production did not slow down. Durian trees kept producing fruit. Harvest season continued. Farmers kept picking, but there was nowhere for the fruit to go. Soon, warehouses began to fill up. Then they overflowed. At least 40,000 tons of durian were left unsold. And durian isn't a fruit you can store for long. It's highly perishable. Without fast transportation and proper storage, it spoils quickly. So what happens when tens of thousands of tons can't be sold? They start to rot. Imagine standing in a warehouse filled with fruit you worked months, even years, to grow, and watching it slowly spoil, knowing you may never recover the cost. For many farmers, this wasn't just disappointing, it was devastating. And here's the deeper problem. China isn't just one market among many. For durian, it is the market. No other country has the same level of demand. No alternative buyer can absorb tens of thousands of tons overnight. So when access to China doesn't go as planned, there's nowhere else to send the fruit. This is the moment everything changed. What started as a story of opportunity turned into a crisis. And naturally, people began asking, who is responsible for this failure? When something goes this wrong, people start looking for a reason. And for many farmers and exporters in the Philippines, the answer seemed obvious. China must be blocking their durian. From their perspective, the situation didn't make sense. The demand in China was huge. The market was still growing. Other countries were exporting more than ever. So why was Philippine durian barely getting in? Some began to believe that this wasn't just about business. It was about politics. There were claims that China was quietly restricting imports, making it harder for Philippine durian to pass inspections or enter the market. Others saw it as a form of economic pressure, a way to send a message without making any official announcement. For farmers, these ideas weren't just theories. They were tied to real losses. Imagine expecting to sell your entire harvest, only to be told it doesn't meet requirements or that it can't enter the market. It's easy to feel like the system is working against you. This created frustration and anger. Many farmers felt they had done everything right. They planted more, produced more, and followed the opportunity. But instead of success, they were left with unsold fruit and growing debt. So the question became even more serious. Is this an example of economic retaliation? Or is there another explanation? To answer that, we need to look beyond the assumptions and examine what's really happening behind the scenes. To really understand what's happening, we have to look beyond assumptions and focus on something more practical. How does a fruit actually get accepted into a major market like China? It's not just about having a lot to sell. It's about meeting strict standards every single time. And this is where the Philippines faces serious challenges. In many areas, durian farming is still done using traditional methods. That means less monitoring of pests, less control over chemicals, and less consistency in quality. For example, in some orchards, there are no modern systems to track diseases or pesticide use. As a result, when the fruit is inspected for export, it may fail to meet safety standards, especially if pesticide levels are too high. Now, add another layer. In recent years, China has made its import rules much stricter, especially for food safety. Every shipment has to pass detailed checks. If even a small issue is found, the entire batch can be delayed or rejected. So even if the Philippines produces a lot of durian, not all of it qualifies for export. But quality isn't the only problem. There's also logistics, how fast and safely the fruit gets from the farm to the customer. Durian is extremely sensitive. Once it's picked, the clock starts ticking. Top exporters like Thailand and Malaysia have built highly efficient systems. Fruit is sorted and packed quickly. It enters a cold chain within minutes, and temperature is controlled from farm to destination. In some Thai orchards, the entire process from picking to refrigeration is completed in under 90 minutes. This keeps the fruit fresh, safe, and consistent. Now compare that to a weaker system. If transportation is slower or cooling isn't immediate, the fruit can start to spoil before it even leaves the country. By the time it arrives, it may no longer meet quality standards. This creates a huge disadvantage. Because in a competitive market, buyers don't just ask, who has durian? They ask, who has the best, safest, and most reliable durian? And right now, countries like Thailand, Vietnam, and Malaysia have a clear edge. So the issue isn't just about access to the market. It's about being able to compete inside the market. But there's still another layer to this story. One that goes beyond farming and logistics. Because in global trade, relationships matter too. But global trade isn't just about growing good products. It's also about relationships, trust, and reliability. When countries trade with each other, they're not just exchanging goods, they're building long-term partnerships. These partnerships depend on consistency, clear standards, and stable relations. If one side becomes unpredictable, whether in quality, supply, or policy, it can affect how much business flows between them. And this is where the bigger picture comes in. China is not just any buyer, it is the largest durian importer in the world. That gives it significant influence. Think of it like a huge supermarket chain. If one supermarket buys most of your products, it can decide which suppliers get more shelf space, which products are prioritized, and which ones are reduced or delayed. Suppliers naturally compete to meet its expectations in quality, price, and reliability. Countries like Thailand and Malaysia have spent years building these relationships. They deliver consistent quality, maintain efficient logistics, and meet import requirements reliably. Over time, that builds trust. At the same time, trade can also be influenced by broader relations between countries. When relations are stable, trade tends to flow more smoothly. When tensions rise, processes can become slower or more cautious. This doesn't always mean there are official restrictions. Often, it's simply that standards are applied more strictly and risks are evaluated more carefully. So instead of a single cause, what we're seeing is a combination of factors: strong competition from established exporters, strict import standards, the need for consistent quality and supply, and the overall relationship between trading partners. There's also another development worth noting. China has started experimenting with growing its own durian, especially in places like Hainan. While production is still small, it shows a long-term goal: reducing dependence on imports. So for exporters, the challenge is becoming even tougher. Because they're not just competing with each other anymore, they may eventually compete with local production too. All of this leads to one important reality. In global trade, success isn't guaranteed by opportunity alone. It depends on quality, systems, and strategy, all working together. And when any one of these is weak, the entire plan can fall apart. In the end, the durian crisis isn't just about one fruit or one country. It's a clear example of how global trade really works. At first, the opportunity looked simple: a huge market, rising demand, and a chance to make billions. But as we've seen, entering a major market like China is not just about producing more. You need consistent quality, you need efficient logistics, and you need to meet strict standards every time. Because in a competitive market, buyers always have choices. If one supplier can't deliver, another one will. There's also an important risk that many countries overlook: relying too heavily on a single market. When most of your exports depend on one buyer, any disruption, whether it's quality issues, logistics problems, or changing conditions, can have massive consequences. That's exactly what happened here. The Philippines made a bold bet on one market, but when things didn't go as planned, there was no backup. And that turned opportunity into crisis. So the real lesson is simple. Ambition alone is not enough. Success in global trade requires preparation, systems, and the ability to compete at the highest level. Now the big question is, can the Philippines improve its systems, raise its standards, and compete in this high-stakes market? Or will it miss out on one of the biggest opportunities in the global food industry? What do you think? Is this mainly about quality and competition, or do you think other factors are at play? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive into global stories like this.